You're okay? Okay. Okay, good morning, colleagues. Welcome to African Union press conferences, and it is my honor to moderate this session with our colleagues in Economic, Cultural, and Economic Cultural Council of African Union based in Zambia. It is my single honor to present the presiding officer, Mr. Khalid Budali, the presiding officer and of ECOSOCC for this press conference. Thank you.
Well, good morning, and thank you for coming. First, on behalf of the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council of the African Union, we would like to welcome you to this press conference. So it's give me great privilege to invite all the media outlets and journalists and any other related media outlets. Also, we're joining here today by my friend and my colleague, Head of Secretariat, Mr. William Carew. Also, we are joining here by the Standing Committee, the political leadership, by DPO West, Madame Brenda, my friend and colleague, IT Cluster, Mr. Haroun from Chad, and our program officer, Mr. Nana Kusei, he's here with us. At this point, I'd like to turn over to, and also we are joining here today by CEDO Director. Welcome, Your Excellency, and my friend and colleague also, Madam Hazel from CEDO. Thank you very much for being here with us, and thank you for your support. At this time, I'd like to turn over to my friend, Head of Secretariat, to give us a little presentation, then we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and good morning, members of the Fourth Estate. As you all are aware, the African Union Economic, Social, and Cultural Council, which is one of the organs of the African Union, is a civil society body of the African Union that has a mandate to provide input into the policies and programs of the AU. When you look at the African Union transitioning from the Organization of African Unity to what we have today as African Union, which is more of a people-centered and a people-driven union, there is need for the AU to have an entity that provides direct interaction with citizens and our policymakers. And therefore, the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council was established in 2004 to provide that interface in building strong partnership between government and civil society in contributing to issues that affect the society generally. For this particular press conference, I want to first and foremost indicate that ECOSOCC represents the citizens out there, and it gives full meaning to the people-centric vision of the African Union. So when the African Union said it's a people-centered and it's a people-driven union, you want to have a reflection of that kind of philosophical foundation that has been established by the AU, and therefore AU ECOSOCC give a true reflection to that. So the AU ECOSOCC is the organ that represents the citizen, and it works towards bringing the African Union closer to the people and vice versa. For this press conference, I will want to take the opportunity to provide some quick updates to members of the Fourth Estate. It is first important to note that the media form part of the composition of the African Union ECOSOCC. Because when we talk about the composition of African Union ECOSOCC, we are also looking at professional bodies such as the media, which play significant role not only during period like this in terms of summit, but we know you have been disseminating and educating citizens out there on the work and the policies and processes of the African Union. And therefore, your role is very fundamental, and AU ECOSOCC provides an avenue for you to be able to play that critical role and take ownership and also be part of the African Union. And therefore, I want to take this opportunity to welcome you as members of the African Union, and especially now that we are moving towards opening the call for application for membership, especially for countries and categories that are not represented in the General Assembly. So in brief, I want to talk about a few things. One is the AU ECOSOCC at 20. When I talk about ECOSOCC at 20, it simply means this organ has been in existence for 20 years, since 2004. And this year we are commemorating the 20th anniversary of the citizens' organ, an organ that has contributed significantly to governance-related issues, to human rights-related issues, to gender-related issues, to many socio-economic and political-related issues. You're looking at the aspect of the APSA, which is one of the infrastructure of the African Union that talks about peace. You look at AGA that look at political governance, elections, and related issues. This organ has contributed significantly in popularizing, raising awareness, advocating, and engaging key stakeholders to ensure that there is compliance, there is adherence to all the frameworks and policies that has been established by the African Union. So ECOSOCC has been in existence for 20 years, and this year we are commemorating the 20th anniversary of ECOSOCC. So we will be starting this engagement by developing an ECOSOCC at 20 event communication and branding strategy, where we will launch ECOSOCC at 20 insignia, and then we will start the promotional campaign. So this is just one of those press releases, social media engagement, and press conferences that we'll be having. But more or less, the focus will be to showcase the unwavering support and contribution of civil society over the 20 years within the framework of the African Union. We will also look at opening registration for participants for the 3rd Annual Citizens Forum, which is also coincide with the official ECOSOCC at 20. So we have a flagship project which we undertake on an annual basis after the Malabo summit, where the issue of unconstitutional changes of government was a major concern, and therefore the citizens of Africa are the most affected when there is an unconstitutional changes of government. It affects education, it affects the health sector, it affects the economy, it affects society as a whole. And therefore citizens are mostly affected. The children, the women, the elderly, the youth, even men were all affected. And therefore ECOSOCC, as one of the organs that has that critical role to engage key policymakers, have been undertaking on an annual basis as citizens, or what we call a societal audit, in terms of looking at what are some of the fundamental issues that has led to this unconstitutional changes of government, which has been an issue of the past for those of us who have been engaging in governance-related issues. You know very well that these were issues which we have left in the 90s, but they have now resurfaced again, and therefore it's a major concern. So ECOSOCC has been playing a critical role from a citizen's perspective to see how we can bring awareness to this. So we will also be looking at it as one of our commemorational activity this year. Then in April, we will also be looking at engaging into wide kind of thematic focus of engagement, but working with different development partner donors who want to support and want to contribute. We kindly ask them to reach out to us so that we can work in partnership in contributing towards showcasing some of the good work which African Union and civil society have done over the years. We will also kickstart the execution of the inaugural ceremony of this particular event. We will look at the Wall of Fame exhibition, recognizing people who have played critical role over the journey. Remember, since 1990, when we are talking about the popular participation that has led to the formation of the working group, the establishment of ECOSOCC as an organ, and what we have today within the African Union as an advisory organ that can contribute to policies within the framework of the African Union. So the Annual Citizen Forum, which I talked about, will be there. We will also work on the activation of the ECOSOCC National Chapter. So national chapter of ECOSOCC is an entity that we have at country level that actually contribute in popularizing the AU programs and policies at country level. We want to ensure that there is a direct interface with what is happening at the continental level and then what is happening at the national level. And therefore, these national chapters will then be taking information at the continental level, disseminate among citizens at the country level, and ensure that citizens are aware, they are able to contribute, they are able to play critical part. So we will celebrate also with the diaspora. As you know, the diaspora is one of the critical, the sixth region of the African Union, and therefore they are considered as part of the composition of the AU ECOSOCC. So these are some of the activities that we will be undertaking. The second aspect that I will want to talk about is the call for application. ECOSOCC have a General Assembly, which is the highest decision-making body of the union, of the organ itself. And it's composed of 154 members, 2 from each member state of the African Union. You have 10 organizations that are operating at regional level. You have 8 that are operating at continental level. And you have 20 organizations that are operating at the diaspora level. Unfortunately, as we speak, the 20 slots that is meant for the diaspora, we have not yet determined the mechanism on how that 20 slots can be filled in. Therefore, it's an ongoing process. The framework has been submitted to member states during this summit. They have requested for further consultation together with what we call the harmonization of accreditation mechanism, which is also a mechanism that creates an opportunity for every civil society organization across the board to interface with the African Union and then be able to be granted what we call either a consultative status or an observer status. So these 2 frameworks are ongoing frameworks. Consultations are still ongoing with member states and civil society so that we can agree on the criteria, which will be a fair criteria, a credible criteria, a criteria where when we say you have the status to interface with the African Union, you have the credibility, you have the competency, you have all what it requires so that you're able to add value into the work of the African Union. But the national chapter has already been approved by member states, and therefore we are now moving towards what we call the operationalization of the national chapter. So we have started the operationalization last year. We have done in 5 countries. We are now moving into establishing it in other member states of the African Union so that the African citizens are aware of what is happening within the AU. You will realize that there is normally a disconnect with what is happening at the continental level and what is happening at the national level. Decisions are taken here by member states, heads of state. Citizens out there don't know about the decision. But civil society have a mandate to follow up with those citizens, with those leaders, so that they are able to advocate, they are able to lobby, they are able to ensure that there is practical implementation of commitments that their leaders had made at the continental level. So the call for application will be for specifically countries that are not in the General Assembly already. The call was made in 2022, and you will have to apply, and there are criteria. If you meet those criteria, you will be assessed, and then you will be granted membership through an electioneering process where those who meet the criteria will vote, and then at country level, you will elect 2 country representatives, 2 organizations that will represent that country into the General Assembly. But we are not able to ensure that the 55 member states were fully represented, because if your country did not meet the criteria, then it means the vacancy will still be there. But we have an opportunity that we will open the call after every 2 years, which is the midterm, because the mandate of the General Assembly is 4 years. And therefore, 2024 is the midterm. And we are going to open the call for application this March, and we will be focusing on countries which are not already represented, so that we're able to have membership in those countries that contribute into the work of the African Union. I don't want to labor much, but I also want to conclude that the media has a critical role to play. You have clearly been doing that. You have been supporting us in sensitization, in raising awareness, in educating our citizens on the work of the African Union. I also want to emphasize that the African Union ECOSOCC is an entity that is also open for membership of professional bodies, of which the media is part of. And therefore, even when we open this call for application, feel free, if your institution or your media outlet is registered either at the regional level or at the continental level or at the country level, to also send in your application. And if you meet those criteria, then it will be an opportunity for you to also have a voice. We have had the media in the General Assembly, and remember, this is the highest body of citizens' representation within the African Union, represented by the presiding officer, which simply means if even you have a media representative, it can be one person that can also be elected to be a presiding officer, that can have a direct interface and able to take the floor even at the level of the assembly and pronounce concerns and perspectives of African citizens. And therefore, we want to call on the media that it should not only be during the summit period or when there is an high-level event, but please engage with us, and especially for ECOSOCC, that we are commemorating 20 years of existence. I think it's a huge milestone. And regardless of the challenges in terms of peace and security, in terms of the political governance in the continent, there are significant contribution that has been made by civil society. And some of the positions that we have today, where we can be able to talk freely, free speech, talking about gender equality, human rights, is because citizens, through civil society, have been playing that critical role. So I want to stop here and create an open platform. My colleagues, the head of programs and other members of the ECOSOCC General Assembly, our colleagues from Citizens and Diaspora Directorate, who are members of staff of the directorate that also interface with citizens and the diaspora within the African Union Commissions, are also in the room, and then the ECOSOCC presiding officer, who is our political leader, to see whether we can respond to any concerns, but more importantly, to collaboratively work with you to see how we can commemorate the 20th anniversary of ECOSOCC. So I want to stop here and hand over back to the presiding officer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. William, for these clarifications. Let me make an announcement that on behalf of ECOSOCC, we thank all the leadership, the office of the chairperson, the office of the deputy chairperson, commissioners, for believing in us and giving us the opportunity to work with different departments and different programs. So they have been giving us great assistance, and in behalf of all of the ECOSOCC memberships, we thank them for their support and their accompaniment. Let me add one more thing based on whatever has been said by my colleague, Mr. William. ECOSOCC is the voice of the African citizenry. When you ask an average citizen in different regions in Africa about the African Union, it's very likely that he will answer that he will understand or know what the African Union is all about. So thanks to the ECOSOCC, this organ is the voice of the citizens, that thanks to the civil society organizations working with base level local communities, local NGOs, that really brainstorm and publicize all the activities, implementations, policies about organs, and getting in direct contact with the average African citizen. So I thank you very much, and I'll give it to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Khalid. Thank you, Mr. William. The floor now is open for colleagues from other departments to contribute, or from ECOSOCC or from media colleagues.
general elections later this year. What do you also have to say about that process? And also my second question on the economic angle. We know that a number of frameworks have been rolled out, such as the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We're hosting that in Ghana, but the effects for some is something that we're not feeling because the country is running an IMF program, just like some others on the continent. What do you have to say about the need to expedite that framework and also to ensure that people feel the impact of what's happening? Thank you.
Yes, I think we can take those questions now, and we can do another round after your answers.
Yeah, thank you very much, colleagues. We do have some of our technical experts in the room, and therefore some of the questions I will direct them to my colleagues who are specifically working in those specific portfolio. So Mr. Ose, who is the head of program, we have done extensive work on the aspects of unconstitutional changes of government, and then also we have an established framework on how we contribute into policies and programs of the African Union in addressing some of these critical issues, especially when you look at the theme of the year, like you have mentioned on the aspect of education and on constitutional changes of government. So those two questions, I will want to leave it with Mr. Ose, who is the head of programs, and to respond to that. And then maybe if the presiding officer or any other member have any additional points, they can also give in. But let me respond to one or two of the other question. One is what are the other issues that are affected, that is affecting citizens? When you look at even ECOSOCC as an institution, Economic, Social, and Cultural Council, the mandate which we have is to provide input into policies and programs. And when we talk about policies and programs, within the AU, we are looking at multiple dimensions. It's a multifaceted kind of approach. Therefore, we look at political issues, you look at social issues, environmental issues, economic issues, cultural issues. So it's an all-encompassing issues. And even the manner at which the AU itself is structured around thematic and specific focus, then you realize that our role as an organ is a policy advisory role. And therefore, most of the work that we do is structured around developing perspectives of citizens. I mean, generating the perspective, picking the perspective from citizens, synthesize those perspectives into policies, and then provide it as a policy recommendation. So I'll give you a typical example. When the COVID-19 broke out, in fact, ECOSOCC was one of the first organ within the framework of the African Union, because we have the constituent citizens, to start engaging citizens by raising awareness on COVID-19. And we work with our partner, the African Development Bank, and we did one of the most exciting campaign raising awareness, bringing health experts, and it was done virtually, where we used to have over 600 people online, citizens who want to know what are these whole issues of monster called COVID. There was a lot of misinterpretation, misinformation, which we were able to address, bringing health experts, professionals from member states to come and face citizens and talk to them. And at the end of the day, we use all those information and the perspective and experiences we got from the citizens, synthesize it and develop a policy document, and submit that policy document to the African Union. So that we expect that the African Union, at the highest level of decision making, if another pandemic or anything that we are confronted with, we will learn from the lessons of COVID-19 to help inform us on how we can respond to such pandemic. So this is one of the ways that we work. But to respond specifically to your question, environmental issues is a major concern. We are talking about climate change. And when you look at climate change, it affects the economy, and that is the reason why there is a nexus now between climate change and the economy, and many other aspects. There is also aspects of governance, there are aspects of peace and security, the instability in the continent, the aspects of health-related issue, food security, education. So these are all issues that we address. But our role is basically to advocate, raise awareness, provide policy recommendation, and create an opportunity for citizens to demand for accountability. Beyond that, we cannot do anything. So that is what we do to specifically respond to that question. The second one, whether the policy maker do listen to our recommendation. We normally say, when you look at our mandate, it can be demand-driven, it can be supply-driven. Demand-driven in the sense that we can be asked, because we have all these experts in the room. Our colleagues who are here, they are working in the field, so they are practitioners. They have practical experience. And if you want to inform policy, you need evidence, evidence-based. And therefore, based on what they are doing at country level, the best practices, the lessons learned, the challenges that they have encountered, how do we get all those information to help us to make some analysis based on fact to inform policies? So what we do, we get those information. If we are asked as AU ECOSOCC, provide information on illicit financial flow, we go back to the citizen. What are your challenges with regards this aspect? Get their perspective, and then develop that policy recommendation and supply. That is the supply, the demand-driven. The other aspect is we can look at issues that is affecting the continent. Like now we know there is an issue of climate change. We have developed policy recommendation on climate change. There is the issue on the AFCTA, which my brother have just mentioned. ECOSOCC has embarked on extensive sensitization. One, people need to understand what the FCTA is all about. Citizens need to understand. Government needs to look at the broader and the bigger benefits of the AFCTA in terms of the economic gains that it would bring to its citizens. We should not look at it from a bilateral point of view. We need to begin to look at the multilateral stage where all of us as a continent were able to significantly gain. And therefore, we have embarked on sensitization. We have embarked on a policy recommendation, which we have done. And in fact, we are also talking about accompanying framework, like the Free Movement Protocol. So if you look at our social media page and our engagement, we are one of the organs that has been consistently talking about free movement. In fact, in 2 weeks from now, we will be engaging parliamentarians, looking at ratification on Free Movement Protocol. How do we ratify the Free Movement Protocol so that it comes into effect, so that we're able to have a practical and full implementation of the AFCTA. I want to stop here and I want to call on my colleague who is the head of program. He will be able to give you specific and appropriate response on constitutional changes of government, and more especially on the theme of the year, specifically on education. Over to you, Mr. Ose, as a technical expert. Yes. Yeah. So what we do, our role is to, like I said, we also have a follow-up mechanism role through advocacy and lobbying. So you submit. Remember the structural arrangement of the African Union. There is the aspect of sovereignty, which, and many people normally ask the AU, they normally say the AU, and when they talk about the AU, they look at the African Union Commission, and they look at maybe the organs of the African Union. But the AU is all of us. And the highest decision-making body of the African Union is the Assembly of Heads of State. And therefore, when you send a recommendation, it is upon the sovereignty or the sovereign power of that state to implement. At the Commission level, where we have the ability to implement recommendation, we implement. At the regional economic level, we also submit recommendation to the RECs and the RMs, the regional mechanism. And we have a mandate to follow up and advocate to see that they implement. To respond to your question, some have been implemented, some are contradictory to their laws in their countries, and then it becomes a major challenge. But what we have been doing, like the Free Movement Protocol, they have committed themselves to it by signing, but only 4 countries have actually ratified. And therefore, we have to continually engage with them to see how best we will get the number of countries to ratify, so that this can become law, and then they domesticate and they become law. So, though that they have implemented some, there are many others that have not been implemented, but we have been playing the advocacy and the lobbying role through our civil society organizations at country level, engaging parliamentarians, engaging government official, line ministry, like what we are going to do now in Seychelles, where we'll be discussing with the Pan-African Parliament, which consists of representatives from the 55 member states, to advocate on the ratification of the Free Movement Protocol. Over to you, Mr. Hussein.
What do you recommend on this? Thank you.
My deputy presiding officer for West Africa is here. In fact, they have already had a convening to begin to look at what role that the civil society organization in Senegal, working with the civil society organization in the region, can do. And like we say, we will raise our voice. That is our mandate. We will provide advice. That is our mandate. But in terms of the power to implement those recommendations, they are beyond us. Because each country has their sovereign power and they have their sovereignty. But what we have been doing is to engage. In fact, the presiding officer has been very good in it. In Libya, he will give you an example. Engage in Libya. Engage in Mauritania. He has also been engaging in Mali. We have had a lot of engagement where we are bringing the concerns of citizens to the leadership to say, when these atrocities are taking place, it is the citizens that are affected. And even you being a president, you are part of the citizen. Today, you are in leadership. Tomorrow, you will be part of the wider citizen. And therefore, how do we create a conducive environment where citizens feel free and comfortable? But the presiding officer will respond specifically to that. Let me allow my head of programs, who is the technical expert, to respond to the other two questions. Over to you, Mr. Hussein.
Thank you very much. So I will address the questions on the theme of the year and the UCG and I believe CFTA. So for the theme of the year, what we do normally is we stay within our mandate. You see, the mandate of the organ is to help to integrate civil society, you know, in the work of the union. And the way that we do that, I think I can best explain as having been designed along three main axes. So one is partnerships. So theme of the year for this year is education. Obviously, we have a continental education strategy for Africa that we are implementing that sets out all of the different goals and targets that we want to achieve in terms of education. Obviously, within the regional economic communities and the national sectors as well, we have different strategies that we have for education. So our role is to, first of all, try to bring civil society in partnership with public authorities, whether it's at the level of the member state or at the level of the regional authorities or at the level of the continental authorities. So how can we establish ongoing, meaningful, and practical ways for civil society actors to coordinate and collaborate with public authorities in order to achieve the goals of the existing strategies. Then the second main area that we work, the main modality that we employ is around visibility and awareness raising. So just now I mentioned that we have something called the Continental Education Strategy for Africa, CSA, which is the governing framework for education. Not a lot of people are necessarily aware of the CSA and what it has to offer and what modalities for interaction and engagement are within the CSA, right? So a lot of the work that we will be doing within the theme of the year for this year is to try to raise awareness about the continental framework on education, so people are more aware, or actually the AU does have this, you know, well thought out, integrated approach to education. It has primary level education, it has tertiary level education, it has a lot of STEM focus activities. It's got a lot of TVET, you know, all of these different elements of education that has been sort of packaged in order to better equip Africans to be able to meet the requirements of the contemporary job market, right? So we have a continental strategy that I think we will be working with the citizenry so they are more aware of it. And then the third modality is around advocacy. So as civil society, we always have a role to play in advocacy. That is, I think, one of the things we do best is to advocate with decision makers, both at the member state level, at the regional level, and the continental level, to see, okay, from the field, this is what we are seeing in terms of education, in terms of access to education, in terms of quality to education, in terms of barriers to education. This is what the field looks like, and so we use that data, that information, that experience to package specific advocacy products that we then take to decision makers at all levels, so that they are able to better respond to the needs and requirements of the population. So that essentially will be the way that we'll be engaging on the theme of the year for this year. For the issue of the governance challenges that we are experiencing, especially in ECOWAS and the Sahel, this issue of UCG. I think some of you will remember that this has been an issue that has been on the table for quite a while. It's not just this year. In March 2022, Ghana hosted a reflections forum on this very topic, on UCG. And then subsequently in May of that same year, 2022, there was an extraordinary summit of the African Union on UCG and terrorism that happened in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea. Since then, the issue has continued to progress in, I think, the wrong direction, where you have multiple more countries, experience these incidents. It is something that is very worrisome to the Union. As some of you know, we have continental frameworks and protocols that deal with incidents of UCG. I think some of you have seen some of the responses that have come from both the regional and continental authorities in terms of the sanctions and the expulsions of these member states from the continental and regional bodies. But I think what we do within civil society is, okay, we have the regional frameworks. This is what we have agreed to do as a union. But what can we do beyond that? How can we get to the actual communities to try to understand from the perspective of the citizens, from the people, how they are experiencing these issues? Because we have seen that, a number of these incidents are actually accompanied by what appears to be celebratory reactions from the population. So what does that tell us? What lessons can we draw from the experiences of these populations in all of these different countries that appears to make them welcome, these things that we have all agreed as a collective institution we don't want to see. So what we have done is to establish something called a Citizens Forum that allows us to interact directly with civil society around this issue specifically, so that we can understand what the dynamics are within the community. Because you see that these incidents are arriving at the end of a process or, of a continuum. It doesn't come in a vacuum, right? So we want to understand what the root causes are and what the respective roles of all of the different players and stakeholders are. So in terms of governments, how are governments better able to respond to issues that emerge from the communities and the populations before it ever gets to a point where the population feels like an UCG incident is what they want to see as their response. And so just trying to really entrench a culture of governance and responsiveness from governments to the population. So it doesn't have to get to that point, you see. And so some of those things we are trying to establish within the conversations that we are having with civil society. In fact, we have developed an advisory opinion on this very topic, working with civil society representatives from all over the continent, so that we don't just see this as a governance issue that arrives out of nowhere. How do we better consolidate a culture of interaction between governments and the population? How do we make sure that there's a better sense of responsiveness, a better sense of identity with a national, with a national polity. So I think these are all of the different things that we are doing in this area. I believe that Ghana is going to be hosting a follow-up forum next month. So ECOSOCC is actually part of the co-organizers of this follow-up forum, and we will be bringing in civil society actors to make sure that as we package the responses, we are not just focusing on the punitive measures that come at the end. How do we package in solutions that will help us to arrest some of the dynamics and conditions that will, if we don't address, will unfortunately result in those kinds of incidents. I think we are trying to better establish civil society perspectives and citizen participation, civic engagement. It has to be one part of the solution. For something like this, you don't have a single solution. It's a basket of interventions. So yes, we will apply the regulations as we have them within the AU, within ECOWAS, but we shouldn't stop there. Everybody has a role to play. So I think what we want to do is to really entrench the culture of hearing from the population and trying to find specific ways to integrate civil society within the problem solving. And I think between 2022 and 2024, unfortunately, we have quite a number of countries go down this direction. ECOSOCC has been very active in this area within that time. And so one of the things we'll be doing in Accra is to set up a dialogue as part of the program so that we can showcase some of the learning and contribution that we've seen emerge from civil society. And most importantly, make sure that we integrate that as part and parcel of whatever the Accra Declaration number 2 will be. Because we already have an Accra Declaration number 1 from 2022. We're going to have a second version of that. And I think we want to make sure that in that declaration, in that outcome document, the role of civil society and the population is really well established. Yeah. Then lastly, on the CFTA, quickly, before the PO comes in, I think that I would say that the CFTA has actually started well. To get to a point of achieving a single market, it's a very complicated process, especially when you're dealing with 55 separate economies, with different linguistic, barriers, different systems, different marketing infrastructures. So I think I would actually say that the pace of implementation is quite good. It's been commendable. The way that is being designed is that it's going to be a multi-stage process. So at first you negotiate on different terminologies, rules of origin, things like this. Once you agree on all of those things, then you start to set up the trading rules between the different markets. From there, you're able to establish the single market. Eventually, we want to get to the point of having a customs union. So I would say that the pace of implementation has been good. I completely understand that there is a need for, I guess, people to see it in action, and I think that one thing that we know is that there is absolute uniformity of purpose on this. It's the one thing that the African Union has decided to do that has absolute and total dedication and commitment from all of the member states, and which explains the reason why things have picked up. I think one of the things that we have brought as a contribution to the CFTA is how do we make sure that we are able to use this framework to address some of the issues that exist within our economy. As you know, most of our economies are informal, so how do we bring our informal sector into the single market, So maybe this is an opportunity for us to establish specific mechanisms within the CFTA to address specifically the realities of the informal sector. Another thing that we've been really harping on as an advocacy point, for instance, is how do we use the CFTA to address specific vulnerabilities like women cross-border traders? So from ECOWAS, the Ghanaians going to Nigeria, crossing the border, and there are specific vulnerabilities that you have when you have women, crossing Ghana to Togo, Togo to Benin, Benin to Nigeria. Those are all points where they are subjected to particular issues to do with harassment, and things like this, intimidation, and so we want to be able to use the opportunity created by the CFTA to address some of these issues. But I think overall, I would say that things are progressing well. Yeah.
Let me just add some little inputs based on the unconstitutional change of governments or the situation in Senegal. Bear in mind that ECOSOCC is just an advisory organ. Our approach always will be in a participatory way, given a chance to the civic space and civil societies, and engaging more with civil societies and other stakeholders, such as in most of them are officials. Our plan was to work more and to open the door to different stakeholders. And ECOSOCC was the first organ to put foot on the ground in Libya. And we did manage, despite the security issues, we did manage to bring over 500 NGOs from different regions of Libya. And we get insurance from different stakeholders and officials in there. And it was the biggest success in Africa in March of 2023. And based on the report that was submitted to the AUC, we managed to work on an action plan based on the findings and recommendations that we concluded in that big event. And this action plan was validated by the government of Libya. It was validated, I will not say validated, was approved by the Department of Peace and Security. And we are engaging directly, and hopefully in the next 2 weeks or so, we're going to start implementing, working with different AUC department and other stakeholders in a region and a different part of Libya. The same approach we'll have done it in Mali when this issues that has been raised in there. So we managed to create a series of webinars with different CSOs, different stakeholders, approaching politicians. And I personally went there more than 3 times, try to engage with officials, and we did manage to find to bring some findings in some resolutions to the fact, even though we are still try to be neutral as the best as we can. And we did manage to organize different series of webinars from different regions also in Mali, and our report will be submitted, and then by the end of this year, hopefully to the concerned parties. Hopefully, we can find a way to bring to the advisory report our findings as a civil societies. Our approach also will be under the leadership of our Deputy Presiding Officer. We will be organizing different series of webinars, approaching multiple stakeholders and different civil society organizations from different parts of the region also, to see how can we come up with some recommendations to avoid any unnecessary actions or any unnecessary, God forbid, something will happen there. So we're trying to, ECOSOCC is an organ that tries to put foot on the ground instead of raise awareness with civil society, instead of just being in social media talking about non-official elements. So I'll give the floor, I guess my DPO also want to give us some information about your action plan in the West region. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Because we are running out of time, we started a little bit late, so let us wrap up.
Just one very quick exercise. These things have been happening, like you said, over and over and over. And it's like when I became a president, I'm not learning to what happened to me as president. It's like a culture. Do you think there's any suspicious that there's a third party perpetrating these issues? Because it's only happening on the West, and then in the Middle East, Latin America, where there's no, we can say, stability and peace, right? It's only the West that have peace, besides Russia, because they're against some ideologies. So do you think there is an element of suspicion from a third party operating somewhere, perpetrating this type of events? Because they're very worrisome. While you're trying to build, you are destroying. Are we putting, building to destroy, or we're destroying to build? That's the question. Thank you so much.
Let me answer that question. It's very political, and I'm sure that what you have mentioned right now, it's not new. It started in North Africa in the Arab Spring. So it was contagious, one after the other. One country is falling after the other. Unfortunately, some countries has strong leadership to bring the country back, such as Egypt, I think Tunisia. Sadly, we have seen in the continent, Libya has fallen, and there is a third party always. Remember, Africa is always a victim of international politics and geostrategic politics. So I think we have a deja vu here with West Africa. I mean, when we have seen Mali and then Burkina Faso, then Niger and Guinea, I think. And I don't think Senegal. Senegal is a very strong country. It's an institutional country. It believes in democracy. And I think that Senegal is one of the strongest through the history that's been stable, believe in democracy, and believe in institutional democratic rules. So Senegal, if there is something will be happening in Senegal, God forbid, it has to be a third party. Now Africa is the victim of the changes of the international geopolitics. And I believe that we do in Senegal. I'm sure that Senegal, it's a very strong country. It has good leadership. And what is happening here is just small little influenced based on different people being pushed by foreign, non-African, by foreign entities trying to create some kind of instability in a region. But this has to do with the will of the people again. We are confronted by what happened from the political point of view and then from the will of the people. And I'm sure that that we think that we get our independence, but we still are colonized economically.
Thank you, presiding officers. Thank you, Mr. Khalid. Thank you, colleagues in ECOSOCC. Thank you, our colleagues here and media esteemed guests. And we came to the end of our press conference. And see you in the next press conference. Thank you so much.